everybody. It's been a while. Me and Trent have both been pretty busy over the last couple months, but we're happy to be back and we're happy to be bringing you guys another episode of Unrestricted. We got a lot to talk about today, so for this week's episode, we are going to be kind of just going over some topics that we've been kind of talking back and forth about over the last couple months, and that is the current NFL playoff picture and some predictions, as well as the current state of the Portland Trail Blazers. So we're going to be starting with NFL playoff predictions and just the current rankings. So let's just start with talking about the pretty much undisputed best team in the NFL. At least me and Trent think so. And that's the San Francisco 49ers. So Trent, do you want to open with that?
Yeah, I mean, looking back a few weeks ago when they had their 3-game losing streak, a lot of people jumped off the Niners trail. And I really think, at least from my perspective, that was a good thing, especially from the perspective of Brock Purdy. I think he needed to see what it was like to lose and feel what it was like to lose and see that adversity along with the rest of the team and see what it's like to play without Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel, even those are two really, really pivotal players on any team and especially this team. And so I think that's going to be beneficial, especially getting into the playoffs now that they have faced some adversity. So, I mean, I think that is one of the reasons they are so in stride right now, short of just the fact that they have so much sheer talent. It's unbelievable. But if you look at the Eagles, like they have like almost as much talent as them. Maybe not quite the same thing on the offensive end. But I mean, this team is everything what we kind of wanted the Eagles to be and some a little bit. And so, I mean, I have so many good, positive things to say about this team, as almost everyone does. This may be one of the best NFL teams I've ever seen in my lifetime, outside of some of the early 2000 or mid to late 2000 Patriots teams. So I'm excited to see what they do in the playoffs. To be completely honest, I hope they face some adversity in the playoffs because they have the talent and capacity to just absolutely mollywop everybody. And I hope that's not the case for the sake of entertainment. So, and we'll get more into the field, but I mean, it's clear cut. I mean, even though me and Kyle think they're the best team in the league, I think it'd be pretty hard to find someone who disagrees with that opinion at this current point in time. So, Kyle, what else do you think about them? What are your preliminary thoughts on just their overall outlook?
I mean, like the Niners have had talent. They've been in similar positions in the past. I think this is kind of the culmination of this past pretty much 5 years of this new Kyle Shanahan like Niners regime, I guess. They've had talent, they've had playmakers. Now they have all the talent and all the playmakers. I mean, from a roster standpoint, there's not really much to add. They have depth, they have top guys at all of these positions, including multiple MVP candidates on offense, and then huge defensive playmakers on the defensive end. Secondary would be where they're lacking, but even there, they have guys who are playing above their contracts and guys who are playing above their perceived value. So, I mean, from a roster standpoint, there's not much to add. They're absolutely stacked. But like you said, other teams in terms of like just on paper, depth, talent, that there are comparable teams. This year, it just seems like it's just a perfect storm for the Niners. I mean, in the past, just something has gone wrong every year, and the Niners, for them to maintain this level of play and talent over the last 5 years or so, 4 years, whatever, at some point there was going to be a perfect storm and it was all going to click. And it just seems like that's this year to me. If it's not, if something happens, which certainly could, it's football. I mean, people get hurt all the time. Things happen. Any team can beat any team on any given Sunday. And I'm definitely not ready to write off a lot of these teams, but San Francisco right now, I think they have to be the betting favorite. I think you have to be pretty confident in them going into the playoffs. There's really no kind of downsides or areas to kind of knock them. But besides the Niners, who else out of the NFC do you like to kind of give them the best shot at it?
Beautiful. I was just about to ask you the same thing. Who's probably the most likely at this point, given in time, to knock them off and contend against them? I mean, if you look at rosters, I mean, naturally you probably say the Eagles or the Cowboys, but those are two weird teams right now because they're both coming off losses, and both have kind of hit like a tough stretch. Eagles defense has just been abysmal as far as what their capacity is, and so you want to say them, right? But I mean, I just don't know at this point in given time. And so there's really one team to me that I think is the most dangerous in the NFC outside of the Niners, and that's the Lions, in my opinion. And I know I definitely have some reservation because they don't have any experience, right? I mean, the Lions haven't been in the playoffs in a long time, but they're hungry, and they got Dan Campbell and all those guys. they're like they're like pretty much America's team at this point in time. Like everyone's rooting for them. Never won a Super Bowl. They're like a very easy team to root for. And I really just think once they taste blood, once they get one playoff win, I think this team goes from like, okay, we don't really know exactly what they are yet postseason wise to, oh, look out. Because they have a lot to play for at the end of the day. I mean, I just named a few of them, and they got a lot of pieces that I think actually will elevate when they get to the playoffs, specifically Amon-Ra. So we all know how good Amon-Ra is, and he's having a phenomenal season. He's just Mr. Consistent. When he's in the game, he's going to get 90 plus yards, almost guaranteed 8 catches, like in his sleep. And he can play inside, outside, he can do a lot of different stuff, but specifically his positional spot at slot. Historically, if you look at Patriots teams in specific, like we all know, like Edelman, Amendola with the Welker, right? And those guys somehow come alive when it comes to the playoffs because that's a position that's really difficult to guard when you have a really high IQ guy there, because it's hard to get hands on them sometimes because they're in tight. And so if when I'm looking at Amon-Ra, he's a better version of all three of the guys I just said. Maybe not necessarily better than Welker, but he's like actually that's a pretty good comparison. I feel like is Welker like in his peak. And so I just think those type of that archetype, when they get to the playoffs, they're better. And so I think when we get there, Jared Goff's playing super well. Their line is really talented. Laporta is, I think, going to be a perennial All-Pro. Like he is so good already. And he's got the Iowa background. He's got the backing as far as historically. And then, I mean, I got nothing but good things to say about them. And then defensively, they got C.J. Gardner-Johnson coming back. They got a leader. I don't think he didn't play this past week, but he's coming back soon. He's like right on the cusp of returning. And that's like going to be the heart and energy with experience when he played for the Eagles last year to bring that edge when the playoffs do come around. And so that's the team, I think. What are your thoughts, Kyle?
Yeah, the Lions have a high ceiling and a low floor in my mind. The thing that worries me about the Lions, I would say, is against these elite pass rushes like the Cowboys, the Eagles, and the Niners, when they get matched up against those teams. When Goff gets hurried and starts turning the ball over a little bit, that's when the wheels kind of fall off for them. And you saw that about a month ago when they were kind of going through their hard stretch. When the Lions start turning the ball over, Ben Johnson can't get in a rhythm with the play calling, and that's when kind of the whole what the Lions are falls apart. They start to play from behind, can't use Montgomery as much, and then that's when the Lions kind of have not looked as great this season. But I do think they have an equally high ceiling because when they're clicking, when they're in a rhythm with the play calling, when they're using both those two backs, when Jahmyr Gibbs is ripping off chunk plays after Montgomery has worn the defense down, when Amon-Ra, Laporta just dominating for 10, 15 yards each catch. And I do think Amon-Ra, I like what you said. I think he could really explode in the playoffs against those weaker kind of secondaries like I talked about. Like those three NFC teams, Eagles, Niners, Cowboys, they're all built very similarly. They are high-powered offenses. Their quarterbacks get the ball to their playmakers, and they have great pass rushes, great front sevens, and like the weakness of those three teams is the secondary. And
yeah,
I think that Amon-Ra definitely could explode in the playoffs, and I think they could definitely rip off a huge run. But I also think they could be a first-round exit, to be honest. I think some of these wildcard NFC teams, people are kind of sleeping on a little too much, teams like the Rams and the Vikings. I know, like, from an on-paper standpoint, those teams aren't as great, but I definitely can see those teams beating the Lions if we get kind of an ugly game in the first round. So definitely high ceiling, low floor for the Lions, in my opinion. The other team that'd be a contender to me that we haven't talked about as much is the Cowboys, and for obvious reasons. I know they're coming off of a loss, but they've shown, I think, the highest level of play outside of the Niners at certain points this season. Their roster is stacked. Dak is playing some of his best football. I think this is probably one of the best Cowboys teams I've seen in my life, to be honest. And still that could result in a similar typical Cowboys result. Kind of we talked about a little bit before the season started, just like, do we believe in this team to get it done? And I still don't know if I do, but in terms of playmakers on both sides of the ball, I think they have the guys who can dominate a playoff game just individually, and that would be the scariest thing for the Niners, in my opinion.
I agree. You know, but a week ago, if you would have talked to me, I would have said that they're the second best team in the NFL, clear cut, and that they're actually like pretty tight with the Niners until that big loss to Buffalo. You know what? I'm trying to reserve kind of some judgment for that loss as much as everyone is. Everyone's saying, "Oh, same old Cowboys get their ass kicked after everybody
Yeah.
gets so high on them, and they beat the Eagles in a super impressive fashion." But the Buffalo Bills right now might be they are the hungriest team in the league, and they have the highest potential if they just get it bit.
Yeah,
right? You don't want to see the Bills in the first round. You do not want to see them because the number one scoring team in the league. The losses they have are all so tight by their teeth and nails that they're just a few plays away from being, AFC bye contender, right? Like they're so good. We know this. They're Josh Allen having a few less turnovers, and then them getting their run game going, which they just did. I had firsthand experience of James Cook 200-yard game in fantasy first round got put to the death of me. It was crazy. It sucked to watch. But when that gets into the playoffs and they can run the ball and Josh Allen can take care of the ball, they can beat anybody, including the Niners, if that ends up being Super Bowl matchup. That'd be really forecasting it. But and then one other thing I wanted to say about the Lions. Sorry, I'll get back to you.
Go for it.
Is Gibbs, and this is you because he's on your fantasy team, so you've watched him a lot. I am almost certain that they have been saving him for the playoffs as far as getting him to the 20 touch mark because they know that he was going to hit that freshman year slump. You know what I mean? When they get over to the first half of the season, and they didn't want to gas him out, and he's got so much in the tank, and it's so obvious that I think they're going to unleash him. And not that they're going to reduce the carries of Montgomery, because Montgomery's the hammer. He's the one who absolutely wears down the defense just over and over. And in a playoff series, that's huge because by the time you get to the fourth quarter, then you unleash Gibbs. You give him 8 to 9 touches in a quarter, and all of a sudden that'll break the levee. And then that's when that team could be in a close game and really finish it off. And they've shown against good teams this season that they can finish it off. And then one more thing to piggyback off of that I really like that you said about the way to kind of get to this team as far as their offense, which is really the strong suit of their roster, is when you put pressure on Goff, which I actually think is really similar to the Dolphins. Like it's the same principle. It's like if you can get Tua to hold on to the ball just an additional second, like that's when the Dolphins go from just a ridiculous high-powered offense to like the Bills doing to them what they did, right? And so, but to be fair, that's what happened in the playoffs. Kind of what happened at the end of the season with the Dolphins last year and going into the playoffs. But they did give a Buffalo a run for their money. But they know those two things we just said, that pressure is really their kryptonite, and so they'll have a game plan coming into it because both those teams specifically are super hungry. And we'll wait to get into the detail on the Dolphins because I really want to get into them.
If we have nothing else to talk about in the NFC, and we've kind of started talking AFC a little bit with the Bills, but do you want to just move to the AFC then?
How about we do a little bit on the Eagles? Okay. I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'm curious to see what you have to say about Philly because they're one of the weirdest teams in the league right now, and it's not even close.
Yeah, so obviously I had firsthand experience 2 days ago, Monday Night Football, Eagles, Seahawks. Mm-hmm. I was there at Lumen. I don't know, dude. Like I came in thinking the game was going to go one way, and it didn't go that way at all. And it kind of looked that way. Opening drive, Eagles marched down the field. They look pretty unstoppable on offense. They're kind of marching through the Seahawks defense. They're not getting whatever they want on the ground, with Hurts kind of extending plays, using his legs, and then obviously picking up big chunk plays with AJ Brown and a little bit of Devontae Smith as well. But then they just stall after the first drive. Their offense just stalled and couldn't get anything going. And the Seahawks didn't play a good game really at all, I don't think. Their offense was, you kind of knew it was coming with them. It was the second week in a row of a Drew Lock led offense. DK was silent until the final drive pretty much. They couldn't get him going at all. The other two receivers, JSN and Lockett, were also relatively quiet. Only Drew Lock was spreading the ball out quite a bit. And they just weren't able to finish drives at all. Ken Walker played a great game, but at a certain point, you can only run on the Eagles defense so much. That's not gonna. You're gonna need to incorporate something else if you want to put up a lot of points on them. But as the Eagles offense just stalls this whole game, the Seahawks chip away, and then dude, that final drive, that was like I don't even know. I honestly can't even like remember enough to describe how that happened. Like I thought the Eagles are going to win. I placed a significant bet on the Eagles alternate spread. Wasn't going that way. Halfway through, I was like, okay. I mean, if the Eagles can't win, might as well just like root with the home team and like just see if we can make something happen. So live bet the Seahawks at plus 500 ish. Dude, Drew Lock airs it out. It's so insane. The 12th man was just so hype, so electric. That was awesome to see. But as far as analysis on the Eagles team, I don't know, because I can see them. It's like you said, they have all the talent in the world. If it could find a way to click, like it has clicked at times in the season, I think they could pick up an easy playoff win, because they're probably going to be matched up with the winner of the South, which, I mean, I don't think they're going to struggle even if they don't play as well. So if they can get something going in that game, then they would probably be matched up with the Niners second, which is the nightmare scenario for the Niners, in my opinion, because that would mean they come off a bye, get matched up with the Eagles, and then match up with the winner of Cowboys-Lions, which is pretty much the path of the most resistance for them, I think. I think going through that gauntlet is brutal. And Niners coming off a bye, Eagles coming off like a get-right game against like the Bucks or whoever. Dude, that's scary for the 49ers, because I can, like, the Eagles, there's not really much to say because we've seen it. We've seen it at times this season, and we saw all of last season, and nothing's really changed. They just need to they need to get some more going on offense, I think, is the biggest part of it. I'm not sure, honestly, why like Swift has regressed and Hurts can't do much through the air. He can kind of only do stuff with his legs right now, but if they can put together high scoring games, I think they're just as good as anyone in the NFC, and we've seen it when that's clicking. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you pretty much covered majority of it. And I do got to say, if they do get matched up with the South, I saw Rich Eisen talking about this, I think 2 days ago is what it was. Don't sleep on the Bucks. I feel like the Bucks are a dangerous team for a
they're
weird.
Definitely the
they're
best.
Just weird.
Yeah,
but they're weird. It's a weird team, and they were making this comparison. Would you say that this year's Bucks team is better or worse than last year's, led by Brady?
Interesting. Somehow they're like the same. Like that
I feel like they're better.
Sense. I could see. I was originally going to say it, but I don't know. They remind me of is last year's Seahawks team more. They're like overachieving. Yeah. They have like guys who you thought were going to fall off with the quarterback play, like Mike Evans. Like, no, Mike Evans is going to be really good still. They remind me a lot of last year's Seahawks team, and I think they could be in for like a similar outcome, to be honest.
Yeah, and honestly, I just like Baker, and I feel like he has like the energy to pull off like a weird game in the first round that can really put some pressure, because he's just got that fire no matter what, and he knows how to play to momentum and play to pressure. I think that's one thing he does really well. Sometimes I can go too far and he can turn the ball over. So that could totally swing in the other direction. But at the end of the day, that team has a lot of experience. Same thing with the Rams. I mean, the Rams have a shit ton of experience too. I mean, it's a lot of the same pieces as their Super Bowl team. I mean, they're not as talented on the line, but I mean, they still got Aaron Donald.
Yeah,
they still got Cup. Like,
the Rams would kind of be more of my sleeper team than the Bucks, I'd say. I'm kind of a big believer in the Rams. When Kyren Williams is in their lineup, McVay just he cheeses with him. He's
nasty, dude.
He's like Austin Eckler, honestly. Like he's like a prime Austin Eckler. The way they just get him the ball in open space, and he's not like a prototypical.
He's more of a big play guy though than Eckler. I feel like he can break longer runs.
Yeah,
I feel like he's like he's more of a vertical, like, I don't know, like he's got like longer strides and just like a slightly different, but the same in the sense that he just like kind of just pedals his legs all the time and just gets yards and can do everything. Exactly. And is just has a lot of energy and really good stamina. I like that comparison. It's interesting. But yeah, I would say the Rams, like they could go to the NFC Championship hypothetically. It's not likely. I don't think the Bucks could go to the NFC Championship. I mainly just think that they could get a first round upset, but I don't really see them having something beyond that. But the Rams totally could. They absolutely can. I mean, you look at historically at them when they had Gurley at his peak. I mean, that's when McVay can be at his best, because as far as being a play caller, because then all his single back stuff runs through the running back being a running threat, right? Because then they get into their play action, and then Kupp can do his digs, and they do their crossers and daggers and stuff like that. And then now they have Puka Nacua, who we talked about in our 2 episodes ago, I think. And so, I mean, yeah, I mean, they're still the Rams. I mean,
Yeah.
and especially if their defense can just somehow like just like really elevate when they get to the playoffs, which
Mm.
Aaron Donald can totally do. And this could be I don't know if he's said anything, but I feel like this could be Aaron Donald's last season,
Yeah.
one of his last seasons, right? Because he was contemplating retirement a few years ago, last year, right? And so,
Yeah.
I mean, that could play into it too, is like kind of like a last dance type thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, now we can segue into the AFC, and really, I mean, the core of the AFC is arguably four teams. If you want to throw Buffalo in there, just because if Buffalo gets a bid, they're still Buffalo, in my opinion. And then, I mean, the main three, it's the Ravens, the Chiefs, and the Dolphins. And I think maybe the easiest team to start with is the Chiefs, even though it's kind of a weirder season for them. But
Yeah.
in my opinion, like, it's still the Chiefs. They're still really likely to win their division, like almost certainly. So they're going to have a home playoff game to start. It's the same players. This year's defense at their peak throughout the season, maybe one of the best defenses they've ever had. Definitely the best secondary.
Yeah.
Rashee Rice is finally coming into his own. Not that he needed to do it earlier, but he is coming into his own, and he's going to be a 1,000-yard guy over the next few seasons, and probably this season, be in the low thousands. And everyone's concern is, can they catch the ball? Dropping problems, right? That's what everyone. For some reason, people like seem to write them off because of that. If you go look at rankings, like they're not consistently in the top two, like. And that's, I guess, fair if you're going week by week. But if we're doing rankings on Super Bowl favorites, who has the best odds to win the Super Bowl, you could name a lot of traits, negative traits for a team. Catching the ball is a very, very fixable trait, like a very, very fixable issue. There's a lot of other issues that are worse. It's not like it's personnel. It's not like everyone has injury issues in the NFL, but it's not like they have like really, really big ones. Like they're for their most part healthy. Like, it's not like it's the line, which is a really hard thing to get around. Definitely. It's not like Mahomes has really, really bad lingering issues. Like, it's not like it's play calling. Like, it's just catching the ball. They're like 2 or 3 catches away from being an 11-win team.
Yeah.
Similar with Buffalo, but in different ways.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents. What do you think? Maybe you have a more broad.
No, I mean, for the most part, I agree. They're a few kind of weird plays away from being an 11-win team, like you said. At the same time, they haven't had really huge stretches where they've just looked like flat out dominant, like a team like the 49ers, for example, which is uncharacteristic. But like you said, it's the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid at a home playoff game. I mean, what are you going to do? Are they not going to win one game and then, what do you know? Like, we're deep into the playoffs. The Chiefs are there again. But, I mean, are you going to bet against them? Like, no.
Yeah,
right?
That's what I'm saying, dude.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to bet against them. For everything they've had this year and people kind of being out on them, I won't be one of them. I mean, the Chiefs are probably, you could say, the favorite still. I probably would say that's the safe pick, but in a year where the AFC is very wide open and the kind of top teams are teams that I don't really have as much confidence in as maybe some people, give me Patrick Mahomes. But the Buffalo Bills, who you talked about earlier, I think the Buffalo Bills might be the best team in the AFC, at least right now. Like you said, they've kind of had a weird season, but before the season, we kind of talked about everybody's like suddenly out on the Bills because they lost one playoff game to Joe Burrow, and everybody was just out on them. The window's closed, it's over, and why was my question. And then we kind of saw why throughout the season, and then everybody jumped off the train like it's over. Diggs is going to leave. And they have to pay all these players now. They're going to lose their secondary. Like Buffalo's window, like they blew it. They had the chance. They got screwed in the overtime rules against the Chiefs. That was their year, and now it's just never going to happen. But I don't think so. I mean, look at how this team is playing right now, specifically on offense, because in this AFC, you need offenses who can duel in a playoff game and go get a score when you need them. And that's what the Bills are like. That's their identity, I'd say. Josh Allen, for his mistakes, for everything he does, can go head-to-head with any quarterback in the league in a playoff atmosphere, including Patrick Mahomes, and we've seen that. If they get James Cook going like they did last week, I mean, this offense is so high-powered, and I know there's teams like the Dolphins who have high-powered offenses and the Chiefs who have Patrick Mahomes, and and the Ravens, who have just a great run game, and Lamar Jackson is playing great once again this year. But I don't know, man. I think in the playoff atmosphere, Bills, they're hungry. They're going to be on the road a lot. They're going to have to rattle off 3 wins. So, I mean, going up against good teams, it's difficult to do, but I really like the Bills going into this playoffs, and I really hope they get a bid because I think it'd be a shame to miss out on this year's Bills in the playoffs, in the AFC playoffs, from just a pure entertainment standpoint.
Me too. I'm hoping they win out. I've been saying that over the last few weeks because, yeah, I mean, this is the first time we've seen them with a legit run game. That's not just Josh Allen getting 60 yards and then 2 or 3 other people getting 15. Like,
exactly.
If James, in my opinion, if James Cook gets 80 yards, they cannot lose. Like, damn near cannot lose. Like, unless James Cook 80 yards and then they have less than 2 turnovers, so 1 or less, they are very, very hard to beat. Yeah. Very, very hard to beat. And so, and their pass rush is just filthy. Like, and I think it'll get better when the playoffs get around. And I think they made some pretty good additions to that defense. I feel like just like small little tweaks, and just some players kind of coming into their own. Yeah, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with everything you're saying. And just like their first game in the playoffs, if they end up making it, everyone just pay attention right off the bat in the first quarter. If those first 1 or 2 drives, they're getting 5 yards a carry, like, this is going to be a dangerous team. Yeah. Really dangerous.
Yeah, I agree.
And then, I mean, just piggybacking off of just like what you're saying about Josh Allen, like there's him and then there's Mahomes as far as the guys who can process information super quickly while also having the ability to run and extend plays and just have all of the tools with really no weaknesses outside of trying to make too much happen and throwing picks. Mm-hmm. But you can't really name another quarterback. Maybe Jalen Hurts, but he's pretty banged up right now, and it's not really like he's not looking as good as he did last season. But when the playoffs get around, he may get around to be a little bit better, and then also have just like cannon of an arm, and then just the offensive weapons around them. Like those are the 2 most scary quarterbacks. It's Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, not even in my opinion, just in almost anyone's opinion. Mm-hmm. And I love Tua, and we're about to get into the Dolphins, but you can minimize him and you can take away his ability to do the quick passing game. A lot easier said than done, but we've seen it. And Buffalo knows how to do it. We'll see. That's why I'm really excited to see their second matchup with Buffalo. Mm-hmm. And we might as well just segue right into the Dolphins right here, because this is one of the things I really wanted to say about them. I think this week, and this will be good because we get to see this really quick turnaround in a few days. I think this week they beat the Cowboys and they defeat the narrative that they can't beat talented winning playoff teams. And I think them beating that narrative before the playoffs start is going to unlock a lot on this team, because their defense is insane. They make plays. Like they may break at times, but they make big plays. Jalen Ramsey's been a massive asset to them, and he's playing great football right now. And Bradley Chubb is really talented. Van Ginkel's the freaking man. I love watching Van Ginkel. He just always makes plays. Javon Holland is great. Is Javon Holland injured, or is he because I know he was like banged up a little while ago.
Yeah, I believe he's still injured.
I think he's still injured, yeah. Let me just verify real quick. Cut. And then let me verify, and then I'll come in for a second. Just I don't want to get that wrong. I have all the injury, like the whole injury report for every team up, so I can do this pretty quickly. And then once I say the injury, you want to just like jump in and say your perspective. And then let's talk about Achane too, because I have an interesting perspective on same thing basically about Gibbs, about how like I think they're saving him. I know he was injured, but injured reserve, Jalen Phillips, Javon Holland is questionable. Okay. All right, set. So yeah, Javon Holland's questionable, and so they need him to be healthy because he's been great over the last 2 seasons. Super talented player on their defense, and obviously you got Xavier Howard is also questionable. And so hopefully those guys can stay healthy and keep their defense at the high caliber output that they've been putting out in the last few weeks. Kyle, what's your perspective on the Dolphins and kind of your opinion?
Yeah, so we kind of hinted at this earlier, and I didn't like put it together before the show or anything, but I think I have like the same thoughts on the Dolphins as I do the Lions. They're kind of the Lions of the AFC, although they do have Tyreek Hill, which I guess adds a different element as he's kind of the, I mean, arguably the most valuable player in football. Um, but I think very similar to them as I do to the Lions. We talked about how if you can hurry Tua up just a little bit and force him into mistakes, that's kind of the Dolphins' weakness. And yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think this team has a super high ceiling. Like I said, if they can get a bye, for example, and then beat I don't know, let's say a Cleveland Browns team or a Jacksonville Jaguars team in the second round, they get themselves matched up with the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. Yeah, this team can go to the Super Bowl and even win it for sure. But I could also see them kind of getting. I mean, what if they get matched up with the Bills in the first round? That'd be an awesome game. I'd love to see it, but I don't know if they're making it out of the first round again. So I think this team has a super high ceiling and a super low floor. We've seen their ceiling at times, like you said, they're not. They still have this kind of narrative hanging over them that they can't beat good teams. I'm not sure if I exactly buy that, but I do think there are a lot of good teams in the AFC teams. I don't think the Dolphins are like miles ahead of the Chiefs or the Bills or the Ravens or, I mean, maybe even the Texans when they're on. I don't know. We can talk about them a little bit, but yeah, I like this. I like this Dolphins team. I think it would be best for them to get that bye. I think that's honestly pretty important for them and host home field throughout the playoffs because I don't know if Baltimore gets that bye, then I think I think the draw could be kind of unfavorable for them, especially with, like I said, Buffalo at the bottom of the like wild card right now, which should be terrifying for those teams kind of fighting for that one seed because whoever misses out may get the present of Buffalo in the first round. But as far as the Dolphins go, yeah, very similar to the Lions. High-powered offense. Tyreek Hill, like one of the best football players I've ever seen. I was thinking this other day. This is kind of a side tangent, but a prime Antonio Brown versus a prime Tyreek Hill. I'm taking Tyreek at this point. I think he's pretty much the best receiver I've seen outside of Megatron. But yeah, like just what he's able to do, how he's able to unlock their offense, and also they have maybe I'd call the best play caller in the NFL. So they have weapons. They have the best weapon. They have elite play calling. They have playmakers on defense. Their defense has made plays at times, but is susceptible to a team like the Bills, I'd say, or even the Chiefs. I'm not as high on them as some guys. I think I would have the Chiefs and Bills over them, like personally, but like I said, high ceiling, and I think they could go all the way if the kind of matchups go their way and the cards are right for them.
Yeah, I think there's some offensive improvement too that's to be had in the next few weeks, which is terrifying. And we kind of said this after week 3 too, because Waddle was out after that Broncos crazy game where they put up 8 million yards, and Waddle was out, and even since then Waddle was never really had that breakout week, and it even seemed like his confidence wasn't really there.
Definitely.
And Reek being out this past week, I actually think was huge for them because he was able to have his 180-yard game and get his confidence like reestablished and realize he's the guy. Like he could totally be the guy on any other team, and he's still the guy on this team when the moments call upon him. Because I know a lot of the attention goes to Tyreek, and they're going to need both of them to really terrorize defenses throughout the playoffs and maximize their ability when teams take away their strengths, which is Tyreek. They're going to be double shading him, kind of what Belichick always did to him. I'm sure people will take notes on some of those like older Chiefs Patriots matchups and do some things against him, which I think Buffalo kind of has done as well. They do a really good job defending Reek. But then you throw into the idea that I really think this Dolphins offense in the red zone it's like Chiefs-esque in the sense that it's just so entertaining, and there's so many little like grooves and changes that they do to wrinkle in with their motion, their exit motion, and all the little stuff they do. They always have 2 backs in and one guy is a wing, and then Chan. I really think they're going to bump his touches up, similar to what we were saying with Gibbs. Really, they've kind of been waiting to unleash him, and I think they could easily give him 20-25 carries. And then let's not forget about Mostert. I mean, the dude is a touchdown machine in the red zone. He's got phenomenal vision. And if he gets the edge and you hesitate just for a second, like he's going to score every single time. And so Yeah, I mean, there's so many things I could say about this offense. There's not enough time in the world for me to get to all of it. But if they're on, can beat anyone, no question about it whatsoever.
Yep.
So yeah, we can transition to the Ravens now if you wanna give your
Yeah.
introduction to them and your thoughts on them.
Yeah. Ravens are the team I'm lowest on out of these four for sure. And it's, I
Bias.
mean, could be an AFC North thing. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, obviously, I watch the North closer than any other division. I'm familiar with these teams. Steelers get them twice a year. The thing with the Ravens is, and it's been the thing with the Ravens, and we're starting to see them break out of this, getting Zay Flowers going a little bit. Odell's been good lately, but it's just how one dimensional they are and how in a playoff setting they've been exposed for that in past years. And I'm not sure that this year is going to be any different, to be honest. Like, they're banged up like they always are. Mark Andrews being out is really hurts them. Like, I really wish he could be healthy by playoff time, because while Isaiah Likely is playing well in his place, and Ravens fans, I know they're huge on Isaiah Likely being like a top 10 tight end and just doesn't get the opportunity besides Mandrews. And I mean, I like Likely. I think he's a good player, but when you have a backup tight end replacing your number one receiving option, it takes away an element of dynamicism to their offense. And Lamar's turnovers are what they are. I mean, it's part of the kind of deal with him. It's something that you probably want. You'll probably take when you get a guy who can make the plays that Lamar Jackson can. You take the turnovers. It's the same with Josh Allen. You just accept that. But I don't know. Come playoff time, I don't believe in this offense to hang with the fast-paced, high-scoring nature of teams like Bills, Chiefs, and Dolphins. Not too in depth with them, but that's just kind of my initial thoughts. How about you?
I love their defense. I really think their defense flies around. I think their D line is really slept on. It's not a lot of like really big names throughout their roster, but I just think, and their secondary is great too. Like Geno Stone, I mean, he's second in the league in picks, right? To Bland, which is like a pretty untouchable guy right now.
Yeah.
But I think their defense is a lot better than a lot of people give them credit for. And I think it gets overshadowed just by the fact that, I mean, you have the Browns and the Steelers in the same division, and then a lot of other defenses playing really well right now. And so they almost get forgotten a little bit. And for the same reason, what I was just saying, not a lot of huge names as far as like everyday media and casual fans. But yeah, I think you're right. Their offense scares me because it's not as dynamic as a lot of the teams we were just talking about. Certainly not the team we just finished talking about in the Dolphins, which is an unfair comparison. But and Zay Flowers, I mean, he's a better version of Hollywood Brown. I still think Hollywood Brown's really good, but I think Zay Flowers is going to have a little bit better of a trajectory than he did. And so it's a player that Lamar's familiar with, and they seem to have that connection, like pretty on point. Odell seems like he's back, and I think he usually elevates in the playoffs. But I mean, they're one injury away on their offense from like being really hindered. I mean, if Zay or Odell gets hurt, like it's going to be, I just don't know if they have the firepower at that point. But I love Lamar, one of my favorite players in the league, always has been. If I could watch him make a deep playoff run and contend for a championship, I would be so happy. Like, I would love for that to happen. But I mean, he just hasn't shown that yet in a playoff setting, and he's almost like similar to like the Dolphins, how you can kind of like, again, much easier said than done, but we've seen it, can cut off their strengths and then kind of make them play with a hand behind their back. Same thing with Lamar. I mean, there's things you can do to him, not letting him get outside of the pocket, and really taking away some of his comfortable. And not having Mark Andrews is one of those things that's already been done for him. I mean, hopefully Isaiah Likely can fill that void, like you were just saying. But like he usually needs that safety outlet, as any quarterback does. Yeah. And not having that's huge when you get into the playoffs and they take 1 to 2 of your biggest strengths away. You don't have that safety outlet to go to. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why, same thing. Like if like Kelsey were to get hurt, it becomes drastically more difficult for the Chiefs. Yeah. But I mean, Mahomes is a little bit different. And Andy Reid knows how to put together kind of a bootstrap offense and figure stuff out in a weird way that in a way I just don't really know if the Ravens can. Could be wrong. I mean, they've had some of the most impressive wins this season, like by far, and they've played well against good teams, and they really do. Same elements that gave us concerns in the past, but there's something different about this team compared to those. I don't think they're going to be a first round, whatever their first round of the playoffs is, depending on the matchup. I think if they play the Chiefs or whatever it ends up being, if they end up getting the bye or however that ends up shaping up. I don't know exactly how that will, but I think they'll probably win their first matchup. That's my prediction. I don't see them being just the first round as they have been in the past.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my 2 cents on them. And then there's really 2 other teams that could really be a threat, in my opinion, that could steal a game. And that's the Browns and the Jaguars. And I'm obviously much higher on the Jaguars because they have all the elements to be a good playoff team. They got in the playoffs last year, did a little bit of damage, had that crazy comeback game. I do. And I actually, preseason, I bet. I placed like a $20 bet on the Jags to make it to the AFC Championship, but to lose. I still think that's not outside of the realm of possibility. Had this weird matchup this past week. It was, I think it was the most yards with the least without scoring in the first half in NFL history. Was that the statistic? It was something along those lines, right? So that's a weird game. But I do like what the Jags have, and I think Doug Peterson is much better coach than a lot of people realize, and maybe they've kind of forgotten a little bit. But I think the playoffs this year could kind of remind some people, like they're not a pushover team at all.
Yeah, the thing with the Jags for me is like last year was a huge overachievement year, and then I feel like they kind of plateaued when people expected like the consistent linear improvement, and that's okay because this is still a team that's like only a few years out of a rebuild. So like being at this spot right now is they're in a good spot. But I think people were looking for a next step when they took kind of 2 steps last year when they didn't really need to. If they had just taken 1 step last year and then we're where we're at now, I think people are a lot more favorable to this team than they are right now. But people were looking for that next step, and I still think they're missing a few playmakers to kind of get there. I like the Jags. I like what they have going. I like Trevor Lawrence a lot. Calvin Ridley didn't work out as much as we kind of thought he may, but I don't see it. I could see it like a playoff game, like a spoiler, like you said, but I don't see a deep run for them. The Browns are interesting. I mean, they're a classic AFC North team as it stands right now. I mean, their offense is gonna not allow them to win a playoff game, in my opinion, but their defense is just as good as anyone's. I mean, their defense is absolutely locked down. They have playmakers in the secondary and in the front 7. Myles Garrett, obviously one of the best defensive players in the league. They obviously have players on offense as well, but that offense can't hang with any of the 5 teams we just said, and I think that'll be exposed come playoff time. What are your thoughts on the Browns?
I mean, they're just in every game somehow. They're just somehow in every single game, and so that's just like what makes me kind of reserved from kind of writing them off, which I think most people kind of will. But I think whoever matches up with them in the first round, which is the Jags right now, right? They're not going to take them for granted at all. I don't think they're not the type of team that I feel like people will overlook, which is why I think they'll probably end up losing in the first round, just because their defense is so formidable and so talented that I think teams are going to prepare really well for them. And I think, like you said, at the end of the day, their offense is just it's not going to be able to hang. Like their best bet is if a team decides to overlook them.
Yeah.
Internally, which you never know, could totally happen. I mean, Jacksonville's a young team. That could be the type of thing that they do, but I don't see that. I don't see that happening really. I mean, they could just beat Jacksonville though, just for the sake of like, I don't know, an experience, and like we were just saying, maybe people being too high on them preseason. But one playoff win is their cap, probably.
Yeah,
in my eyes. Yeah.
Any other AFC teams? Broncos, Texans. Want to bring them up?
I think I'm good. I mean, the Texans are fun. I would love to see them go. I mean, they could do something kind of like what the Jaguars did last season.
It's the
same thing, but it's crazy. It's crazier in my opinion. It's a crazier, more with less. Like I think that they have less this year than the Jags did last year.
Yeah.
So it would be even more impressive if they went in and they won a first round game. But I don't. It looks like unlikely that Stroud's going to play this week, and I think that just shoots him in the foot again. They're a gutsy team, though, man. They're gutsy, and they just come up with wins. And D'Amico Ryans is the real deal.
Yeah.
Like that. This team is they're going to be fun to watch over the next few years. I feel like we're in really good hands. Like we still have like many years left with Mahomes. The Dolphins are not going anywhere anytime soon. Jacksonville's only going to get better, like we were just saying. I mean, shit, Detroit. I mean, who knows what happens with Goff going forward? But what if they draft a QB that ends up developing 2 or 3 years down the line? Like they've got a good core. Eagles are still pretty damn young. Like all those players are young. Like there's a lot of young teams that like are already good, and then you throw the Bengals in there too. Like we could be looking at a similar like core of talented NFL teams that are kind of always competing for the next 5 to 7 years. Honestly, like we're in a cool era. I don't even really think it's hit everybody yet because there's already kind of like rivalry stemming. Like you got Buffalo, Miami, you got Buffalo, Kansas City, all these little ones, and then AFC North, like we were just talking about, Niners, Eagles. Like you got all those things kind of popping in and out of it of the league in the last few years, and those are only going to all grow. It's like this post Brady era. It's just like we're in great hands, and it's nothing but great things to say about it. And hopefully this season adds to the Chronicles, and it'll be interesting and wild. Hopefully something weird happens. It's not just Niners Chiefs, which it very may well be.
With that being said, if you were a betting man, what would your prediction be? Super Bowl.
What I just said.
Niners over
Niners Chiefs pretty handedly. That'd be. And what would I want? What would I want? That's a more interesting question. I mean, the two teams that we compare to each other, Dolphins Lions, would be the goddamn sickest thing ever. Like I would love to see that.
Yeah. I'll go a little different. I'll say Niners Bills, but that's a little wishful thinking. But I don't know.
Well, give me what you think and give me what you want.
Niners Bills, I'll say, is what I think. What I want. See, like I kind of want the Niners to not be in it just because I think they're better than the other teams. So I guess I'd say Bills.
That's why I say that too, because I know if they go, they're going to win.
Then we just saw what that was. I want the Bills in it. I absolutely want. I want to see Buffalo in the Super Bowl. That's my team from the AFC that I want to come out.
What about Detroit? Detroit would be crazy.
Detroit sure.
America's team.
Bills Lions would be awesome. All right, so now we're going to transition into a quick update on the Blazers. So the Blazers are obviously in a tanking season right now. It's a rebuild. We traded our franchise player, and we have a ton of guys under the age of 25 playing big minutes for us this year. With that comes a lot of losing, obviously. There's going to be growing pains, but there's been a lot to kind of get excited about, I think, with this team, and a lot to kind of analyze what direction this team is going in. So first, we can kind of talk about the 3-guard rotation. So obviously, this has been a big point of contention, having our 3, in my opinion, our 3 best players, and also our 3 kind of not youngest players, but our 3 big future pieces. Anthony Simons, Shaden Sharp, and Scoot Henderson all being natural 1s or 2s, all being natural guards. There is some kind of differing thoughts on that. Scoot Henderson battled some injuries since coming back. He's been coming off the bench. His shot has been looking better since coming back, still relatively inefficient. And just out the gate, Scoot Henderson has not shown the kind of transcendence that I thought he was going to. I'm not completely out on him by any means. I think he still has a ton of potential to be a great player, specifically with just his playmaking ability. But there are things that I thought he would be better at coming into the league, specifically his jump shot as well as his rim pressure. I think they kind of go hand in hand because defenders are so willing to just backpedal and back up when he's putting pressure on. And I've seen him put some really good downhill moves on defenders still. I don't want to take that away from him. I've seen him show a lot of burst and a lot of athleticism, but he's not able to get into the teeth of the defense as much as I'd like, and as much as he'd probably like to be the most efficient and the most effective. That's because his jump shot's just not there right now, which is okay. He's still young. That's something that he can develop, and I think he has a decent chance of developing. But if his jump shot is going to be this ineffective to the point where we were just talking a little bit ago about like worse than like a prime Russell Westbrook or worse than John Morant, then that's going to hinder his ability to do other things, and that's going to kind of limit his upside and limit his potential to be a transcendent superstar point guard. So he's coming off the bench right now. in favor of Anthony Simons, and I think that's a really good thing. Anthony Simons, I have been higher on than a lot of other Blazer fans. This started like last season, even the season before. A lot of guys were out on Anthony Simons this offseason. They wanted to trade him and I was somewhat on board if that meant keeping Dame, but since Dame got traded, I have not wanted to move Anthony Simons at all, and I still very, very much think that. I think this was the thing when we drafted Scoot Henderson. Scoot Henderson cannot be a bust. He can be a great NBA player and be worse than Anthony Simons. Anthony Simons is a really, really good NBA player, and he still has a ton of potential. He's still extremely young, and I think still has another gear to kick into if he can be the primary playmaker and ball handler on a competent team with good NBA players that play their roles. But throwing Anthony Simons in this like half shooting guard role, playing him at the small ball 2 with Shaden at the 3, we're going nowhere with that. That can't possibly work. And this is the problem, because we can't give up on Scoot Henderson. We've invested too much into him. But at the same time, like I said, there's a very clear scenario where Scoot Henderson isn't as good at point guard as Anthony Simons. And this is why I'm already skeptical about this Blazers rebuild, because I like the idea of a Shaden Sharp and Anthony Simons backcourt kind of leading us into the future. And the Blazers were infatuated with Scoot Henderson for obvious reasons. I'm not going to hit on that. At the time of the draft, I saw it as well. I would have made the same move. While I liked Amen and Asar Thompson, and while I think at this point those would have been better picks for us, because just think about a backcourt of Anthony Simons and Shaden Sharp with Asar Thompson on the wing. Like, it didn't happen, whatever. But Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, Shaden Sharp, they can't all be in our future. That being said, you do not trade any of them right now. I'm very against trading any of them in the near future. Let them keep playing, let them keep developing, let them keep accruing value. If you pick up some more pieces and the rebuild is more clear, that's when you maybe move one of them. But I would be very hesitant to move. It's pretty much going to be Anthony Simons. Like, he's going to, like you talked about this a little bit, he's going to be the one that would be moved if it was any of the three. But I really don't want to do that right now, man. I think he still has another gear to kick into. I think he's like kind of our best player right now. And I don't know. This 3-guard rotation is interesting. I'm curious to see how they all develop. They've all shown flashes, Shaden and Anthony more than Scoot thus far, but Scoot's also the youngest, has the least experience. So right now, I'm honestly fine with losing games, letting these guys have all the touches they want. What I'm not fine with is Malcolm Brogdon coming into the game and taking these touches. Malcolm Brogdon's a good player. He's like, I've liked what he's done in Scoot's absence and Anthony's absence when they've both been hurt and he's filled in. Malcolm he's good. He's overrated, I think, by this fan base, who kind of got a little crazy about him when he was starting. But Malcolm Brogdon's obviously a good player. He does not belong on this team. We need to trade him as soon as we can. With this 3-guard rotation, as well as having Skylar Mays, who's like not like anything, but he's a competent backup point guard. If someone gets injured, he can play point guard. There's no role for Malcolm Brogdon on this team, and he has the second highest usage on the team. That can't happen. This is not how a rebuild is supposed to go. I think it's absolutely essential that we trade Malcolm Brogdon as soon as, I think it's at the end of this month that like trades are able to be made for guys that were picked up in the offseason. Something like that. I really think we need to do that ASAP. As far as the rest of the team goes, I think Jeremy Grant and DeAndre Ayton, I have the exact same thoughts on both of them. I don't think either of them are in our long-term futures, and I'm okay with that. Jeremy Grant, like, almost certainly isn't. Finding a trade partner for him could be somewhat challenging, but
easier than Ayton.
If he's on the team, yeah, definitely easier than Ayton.
A lot easier than Ayton. Ayton might be impossible.
Yeah,
I don't be dead with his max deal for the next 4 or 5 years.
I don't think Ayton will get traded, but I think the Blazers should definitely still look to draft a young center if that's a possibility. Ayton is not. He just doesn't have any dominance in him. He's athletic. He's skilled. He has a decent mid-range jump shot. He is decent at defending the rim on defense. He's just never going to rise to the level of an all-star center, in my opinion. He's just always going to be a really, really good center who's unfortunately on a max contract. And that's just not, we don't need that. We need to aim for something higher. We need to aim for an Alex Sarr or someone like that who can bring the offense and the defense to a new level and add a whole new element, not just a really solid center who's good at a lot of different things and is also paid however much max contract a year. Jeremy Grant is like pretty much the same thing. He's a really good four. He's can shoot. He can knock down his threes. He can play team defense. Not great on the ball, obviously. Can't rebound at all, but is a decent shot creator at the four. And if he was like the fourth piece on a championship contending team, I think he'd be good. I think Golden State Warriors could trade for him. Something like Clay plus Kuminga for Jeremy Grant is something I've been throwing around. I just don't think he's like a tank commander. Like he's going to take the most shots on the team on a losing team. He's going to get his numbers and then that's it. But I think he should kind of get out of that stage in his career. And I want, just like Brogdon and to an extent Ayton, I don't really think he belongs on this team. Kamara, this justifies the Ayton trade in my opinion, because Tamani Kamara was a huge steal in that trade. We pretty much got him as a throw-in, and I mean, in my opinion, he's like better than Ayton. Like if Tamani Kamara,
he's far more valuable than Ayton, in my opinion,
definitely,
as of right now, for sure.
If he
especially throwing the money into it.
If he could develop,
he hits the corner threes. He's like almost like at the stage Matisse is at now already. He's exactly. Not a bad shooter at all. It'll develop. I think he'll be competent from that perspective, and he's like athletic enough to where like I feel like he could develop a bag and like be a 14 points per game guy. Yeah, which would be huge. Like he would be super valuable at that point.
It's kind of what I thought. Like we were potentially getting in like Ryan Rupert or like Chris Murray a little bit less Chris Murray, but like getting a guy like this, it's exactly what I wanted on this team. Ideally, I do probably think he's a bench player or maybe like a Mo Harkless type who's kind of like our fifth starter in like an ideal scenario. But I mean, getting a guy like that in the Ayton trade was a great move by Joe Cronin identifying that player, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. So kind of in conclusion with me, the 3-guard rotation is messy, but I would very much not want to trade any of them. I think Tamani Kamara is a great player and should keep getting all the minutes, all the minutes he's getting right now. I think Ayton is not the answer at center, and while it's going to be hard to trade him, I think we should look at other options at center, even while he's still on the roster. I think Jeremy Grant and Malcolm Brogdon need to be our priorities to trade as soon as possible.
Yeah. My hope is we just get one of those two players. Well, I don't see us trading Jeremy Grant in the next year for sure. Yeah. Like I just really don't see it, just because I think Joe Cronin is going to want us to have like a player, 20 plus points per game guy who can like keep us relevant, which is annoying because like that's just keeping us at like not quite bad enough to like contend for the first or second pick, but like still pretty bad. That makes sense. Just because it like helps the fan base
right now. Like we don't have, like if Jeremy Grant was like out, there would be a struggle with forward depth. Like Thibault and Kamara are like fine, but you can't play those guys at the 3 and 4 the whole game.
Yeah, could be really hard to win games, and I think that's why he's on the roster now. And just you have to pay players. You got to get to the minimum spot on the salary cap and pay enough money to players while you're in this rebuilding position. So it's not a big deal that we're paying him so much right now. But I think year and a half to 2 years, he's got to be moved for sure. Just because our trajectory is not like we're definitely below where I thought we were. I kind of hoped we were going to be this year. Like I hoped we were going to look a little bit better. I obviously expected Scoot to be better. I expected Scoot to be more of like 80% of what John Morant was as a rookie. And he's not. He's definitely not that. Like you said, he's got some injury issues. But like you said about as far as attacking the rim, just to me, it seems like his like mind isn't matched up with how fast he is yet and how athletic he is. And like I feel like one of like the huge selling points on him was like he has a really high IQ as a player. And not to say he doesn't, but like right now he seems very rushed and immature while he's playing, and he's not quite making reads that are 2 steps ahead, which you have to in the NBA. You can't just think 1 step, maybe 2 steps ahead. You have to think about how things are going to process, especially when you're a point guard coming downhill and you're only 6'1", 6'2", right? You have to be especially on your P's and Q's in order to be effective at attacking the rim. And that's why a lot of the times you see guys come in like a Curry or a Dame, which are totally different players, but they came in not having a really polished as far as finishing at the rim and inside the paint game. But they developed that over time because that's what naturally happens. Of course, he's the inverse of that, which is why it's so disappointing that it's not already polished, is because he has to develop his shot. Those two guys came in with the shot right off the bat. And I feel like it's easier to become a good enough finisher in the paint than it is to become a good to great shooter.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's in his future at being a 7 to 8 threes a game, above 35% from three. I mean, that takes a special talent. If that is in his future, like, beautiful. Like that's like best case scenario, and I think like pretty unlikely. And not to say that he has to do that, and like that's like too much pressure to put on a player who's already not naturally really a shooter. But you're right. His jump shot looks good. It's got better as he's gained minutes and gained some experience. But yeah, it's a question mark for me. I totally agree with you. I mean, we have a very similar stance on Anthony. He's way too valuable to dish just on a whim, just wanting to rebuild. Like, you got to keep him until you know what each player is and know if Scoot has the trajectory that's necessary to build a championship team. Because if he doesn't, I mean, if in my opinion, if 3 years down the line, Scoot is still shooting sub 40% from the field, isn't averaging 20 a game yet. Not that the numbers are the only thing that matters, but really playing winning basketball and like maybe developed as a defender in 2 to 3 years, and we still have Anthony. Hopefully, I would hope we still have him at that point.
Yeah.
I think it's maybe you give the tie to Anthony, even though you did make this move, and essentially he's the replacement for Dame in a weird way. But I mean, that's not really possible or fair to put on anyone. But I mean, that's really how it has shaped up mathematically and just logically. But I think 2 to 3 years, really buy in, stay bought into him, and see how it develops. But in my opinion, that's kind of the threshold in 2 to 3 years, because we know what Ant is, and I think in 2 to 3 years, Ant is going to be 28 points per game and even more efficient than he is now. He's shooting roughly 44% from the field and having kind of a down year from three, which obviously doesn't have Dame to space the floor and help give him some looks. So that's why his 3-point percentage just kind of dropped to 35, 34.
Yeah.
But I think that will slightly start to bump up in 2 to 3 years, and he'll be better and more valuable. And hopefully his defense can establish a little bit too, because that is one of his weakest points. But he has every tool to be a good defender. He's freakishly athletic, and he's got the anticipation. And but really what all that boils down to, for me, looking in on this team from the outside looking in, like, to me, my biggest hope outside of really like drafting some tremendous talent over the next few years and drafting a really, really good two-way player that can be the core of a championship team, which could be Shaden, right? But we definitely need to draft a few more like really good players to build a championship core. I think our biggest need as a team is we need an alpha. Looking at Shaden and Ant, which are the two best players on our team, probably two most valuable players on our team. If you're not counting Scoot, because we don't know what he is quite yet. They're both just so quiet. And not that matters. Like, a player can lead by example, but just like the aura that I notice when I watch their games in person and when I watch it on TV, like, it just, I don't see them being like the alpha leaders of like a championship team. Like, there's never really been a team that's really not had a guy like a Draymond or Marcus Smart or someone. And not that they have to be like that gritty, like asshole defensive player, but like it definitely helps when they are. And I think we need that. And so hopefully that's what we get in the next 2 to 3 years, and we can build around that core with talent and then personality and leadership.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm not entirely skeptical. I'm not entirely excited, but I feel like we're in a good middle ground right now. We're just going to sit and wait. We can have our fun watching the Bucks and Dame, rooting for him. Hopefully he can get his first championship. I still like the Heat, still love Jimmy Butler. I'm kind of in a weird spot where if they play each other in the playoffs, I don't really care who wins. I'm rooting for either whoever proceeds at that point in time. So I feel like it's going to be a fun rest of the season and then getting into the playoffs.
Yeah,
for me.
For sure. Yeah, and we can talk about prospects kind of as we get closer. We see more guys in college kind of
Absolutely.
solidify themselves. Obviously, there's a lot up in the air right now, but like you said, adding a two-way player specifically at the 4 or the 5 or maybe even the 3, just not a guard, is so essential in the next few drafts. I know guys at the top, the Cooper Flag next year, Alex Sarr this year
If
would
we
be,
could get him, dude,
yeah, it's the
if we
perfect
could get
player.
him,
It's the
the
perfect player.
perfect player. Yeah. And so, I mean, maybe that's this coming out of this season is the perfect time to unload some of the guys we were talking about, like a
Yeah.
Brogdon or Jeremy Grant, and make that move. And I honestly wouldn't even be that mad. He's like one of the few players where like I'd be like, if you want to get rid of Anthony with everything we just said, like he's the type of guy transcendent, and he's a dog, and he is the alpha. Everything I just explained as far as like a team culture, he's in fucking high school right now, and I know for a fact he has that in him. He's gonna be all NBA, like in my opinion, probably like an MVP candidate throughout his career. I'm really really high on him.
And just defense,
So
switchability, defensive instincts, quick first jump, quick second jump. Like
yeah,
I'd love Cooper Flag. I'd love Alex Sarr this year too. I like the center
yeah.
from UConn. He's like lower on draft boards, but like I
He's
don't
really
care.
skilled though.
I
Like
don't really
he's like
care
the
about
perfect.
yeah, yeah.
He's like
I
the
don't,
perfect new age center.
yeah.
The UConn. Yeah, like that could be like super effective. Sorry, continue.
No, yeah, and just like with these prospects, like I don't really care about these guys who can be ball dominant and score the rock, and there's obviously guys like that in this year's class, like Buzelis, for example, who is a great prospect, but I just don't. I think we have enough of that with this team right now with a ball dominant player like Scoot Henderson, with Anthony Simon, Shaden Sharp. I am like honestly fine either trading back or reaching for like a more defensive minded prospect this year that can just be like a very solid defensive starter, because I think that's what this team needs. And like I said, when more things solidify out, when there's like more of a lottery that is actually predictable, when draft prospects have kind of earned their projected draft position, we can talk about this more. But yeah, I just think going into this offseason, that should be the focus, is really landing a real two-way player with emphasis on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, for sure. So lots of stuff to be excited about going forward with all this. I mean, it's a long game. It's a long game, so it's stuff to be excited for in the long term, which isn't the most exciting thing to kind of segue off of that. But it will be nice, like you're saying about the prospects. It'll be fun because this is like, I mean, I guess the last 2 years we've been in that conversation, but we've had Dame. So like there's been that sliver of hope that like somehow we like pull it together in the middle of the season and like we wouldn't have to be like a top 10 pick. But this year we know we are. And so we can just really, really think about what players we would like, even though we don't really get to control it, but we can hope and we can talk about it. And that's always entertaining. So yeah, so I think that's all we have for all of you guys. But I mean, yeah, I mean, great information thus far. Really looking forward to NFL playoffs, like we were just talking about. We'll do a segment on that before the playoffs start and give our predictions for the field and what we think is going to happen, and do a little bracket, almost like March Madness style. And then we'll continue to give updates and do much more expansive episodes on the NBA, because there's obviously a ton of stuff to talk about. We can do a little recap of the in-season tournament. I mean, that was really entertaining briefly. And then, yeah, great stuff. You got anything, Kyle?
Yeah, definitely going to try to get some more content out here quickly. Me and Trent are kind of have our schedules a little bit more freed up, so we're going to be kind of dedicating a bit more time to getting some content out for you guys soon. But yeah, like Trent said, a lot of interesting topics recently. In-season tournament, like you said, NFL playoffs coming up. Yeah, a lot of good stuff in the sports world to talk about. So yeah, we'll be talking amongst ourselves about that, and we'll be kind of hopefully bringing some interesting conversations to you guys. So yeah.